This week on The Futurists, Tatyana Mamut.
We as workers are going to realize that, like, hey, I need to transform myself because the conditions of work and of labor and of the economic structure are being restructured. And so my nature as a person, my nature as a valuable contributor to society is also, again, going to have to twin in that transformation to reconstruct myself.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tersick, and this week I'm solo because my buddy Brett is flying somewhere else. I think he's en route to Brazil. The guy lives on airplanes. It's astonishing how many miles he racks up. And he does a good thing because he's careful about his carbon footprint. So words to the wise, worry about the world that you live in. The world is alive with discussion about agentic AI. We've been hearing about this trend now for more than a year. Last year was the year everybody talked about it. This is the year when people are trying to deploy it. And as it turns out, those deployments can be kind of cumbersome and complicated, and lots of unexpected surprises arise. Well, that's no news. Everyone who's been using AI knows that's always what happens with artificial intelligence. The interesting thing is that it's actually starting to work, and people are starting to construct companies using AI as an extension of their workforce in the form of autonomous agents that can actually execute work without human supervision. Today, we're very fortunate to have on The Futurist an expert in this subject, one of the leaders in the subject, and I mean that. You're going to hear that in just a second. Welcome to the show, Tatyana Mamut. Tatyana, welcome. Thanks for joining us here at The Futurists.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you because I've been hearing so much about your company from so many smart people that I finally thought, you know what? LinkedIn is available. I'm going to just reach out and do a cold call. You responded in a second. I was super happy to hear about that. So here we are, just a few days later, talking about it. Now, briefly, tell me a little bit about your background, because I think this is going to be quite interesting. You don't have the typical tech geek background to be starting an AI company.
I don't. And one thing, Rob, about your story, how do you know it was me and it wasn't my AI agent?
So we've already covered deep fakes on this show, but yeah, no, that's an issue, right? Even on a Zoom call, you never quite know.
You never know. I could be like, some, short fat guy sitting in some other part of the world. So yes. Who knows if anything I'm going to say is true or not? You can look me up. Maybe have coffee. That's how you know.
That's not the best way to start a conversation, but okay, I'm going to trust you. We're going to build a little trust exercise here. So
we are. Here's me with the coffee right here.
Okay, great.
So you're right. I don't have a traditional technical background. At the same time, I think that the reason I've been so successful in companies like AWS and Salesforce and Nextdoor and Pendo and turning a lot of big companies around and building new products is because I have a skill that not a lot of technical teams have, which is really understanding humans. So if you are building products with teams of humans, or if you're building products that humans have to buy, the thing that you need to have is an understanding about human beings, what they want, how they experience the world, what are their mental models for when they open up a new product, what is the mental model they're coming into the product with. And that is a particular skill that I developed through my social science training, first economics and then economic anthropology, which is where I have a PhD.
Now unpack that for me. What is economic anthropology? I'm curious to hear what that is.
Economic anthropology is the study of how different people around the world have created different economic systems. So everything from like gift economies, you might have heard about like gift economies and like the cola trade, in Melanesia. So that's traditional economic anthropology. In more recent years, economic anthropology has really kind of disappeared in a way because global capitalism is like everywhere now, and you don't have like gift economies as such. But what my particular field of economic anthropology was to take what was at the time in the early 2000s transition economics, so the transition from socialist to capitalist economies, and understand how economics and society interact in order to create a new socioeconomic order. And my dissertation was based in Russia between 2000 and 2005, Vladimir Putin's first term, when the economy was very quickly transitioning from a socialist economy to a consumerist economy. And so,
That must have been fascinating. Do you speak Russian?
I do. I was born in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, so I'm a fluent Russian speaker. Yes.
Oh, that must have been fascinating because that was a time of tremendous change, and I mean, like violent, disruptive change, dislocations that people here could not possibly imagine.
Well, we
Oh,
were going to
fascinating.
start to imagine it very quickly because we're going to go through very similar disruptions in the next few years.
Wow. Okay, that's a good setup. All right, so you have this background in economic anthropology. It's such a fascinating term. Sorry, I'm having a hard time getting my mouth wrapped around it. But it does occur to me that we're going through some of that. It hasn't disappeared entirely, and it's true we probably don't have tribal societies as we might have even in my youth, 30, 50 years ago. But we are going through some changes in terms of like how economies are organized because, for instance, we have an attention economy on the web. That's rather new, and different behaviors are emerging, right? People respond to it. So I think economic behavior is evolving along with technology, we might say. And that probably gives you endless fascination just to look at what happens on Facebook and Twitter and so on.
Yes. And I mean, honestly, the other piece of it is that just in terms of like digital transformations at the enterprise level, we're also seeing the same thing. Like if you just thought about the nature of work and social organization inside economically productive labor, that looks very different, from the 1980s to today. It's vastly different. The cultural norms are different. The tools, the workflows, the types of teams are different. What we value in people is very different, right? It used to be experience and things like that. Now it's a lot more about what is the latest tool that you have learned or entrepreneurial mindset. So all of that stuff inside enterprises as cultures themselves have also transformed greatly.
This is such a good point. Right? So just last week, I was talking to the heads of HR from about 100 different companies in the United States, big Fortune 500 style companies. And one of the interesting things that emerged in our conversation is that the new job that they have to, or the new skill that recruiters have to hire for is agency as opposed to hierarchy and, the ability to work with a team. And the things that we used to value, until fairly recently were important if you're going to be in a corporation. Now what you want to hire for are people who can figure out on their own and figure out how to do things on their own and get a result without needing their hands held or without needing a boss to tell them what to do. Now, that's rather radical. And you can imagine a lot of companies are going to be saddled with really the wrong kind of employee for that kind of environment.
I completely agree. I think that one of the things that has happened through the industrial era, and this is why I'm saying that we're going to be experiencing these radical transitions and transformations also. One of the things in my dissertation, it was the dual transition of economic systems and processes and how people had to reconstruct themselves as human persons, right? And as valuable persons. So in the dissertation, because it was in Russia, of course, there's perestroika, which is economic restructuring. And alongside that, there was a twin transformation of перестроиться, which it means to reconstruct yourself as a valuable economic contributor. This is exactly what is about to happen right now in our economy, which is that we as workers are going to realize that like, hey, I need to transform myself because the conditions of work and of labor and of the economic structure are being restructured. And so my nature as a person, my nature as a valuable contributor to society is also, again, going to have to twin in that transformation to reconstruct myself. So that's why I say like exactly what happened in the early 2000s in Russia is about to happen right now in the United States and the rest of the Western world.
That's a really fresh frame I haven't heard from anybody before, but it really does explain some of what's going on because a lot of people, when they're confronted with artificial intelligence, feel devalued. They feel like it's a judgment on them and their worth. And, if you consider somebody may have spent 25 or 30 years building up a skill set that has been rendered, in a way redundant by AI, because an AI can do it now rapidly over, in seconds. This does kind of dislocate someone's sense of their own worth or their own identity. And there is a crisis happening. I think companies are very ill-equipped to deal with that on a psychological level. That's what
We're
you're
unable
referring
to.
to.
So, one of the things that one of the critical pieces of this whole thing is that the future collapses, meaning that everything that you thought you could predict about your own personal future is no more. And this is why people, like, I've got a 15-year-old and we're thinking about colleges, and her, my husband and I have very different approaches to that experience, where I'm like, look, she's just going to figure it out, and the world is changing. We have no idea what's going to happen. And like, that's okay. We're just going to adapt. And he feels a sense of dislocation. He's like, but wait, what I thought the known future was going to be for her, if she got the good grades and took the right classes and then had the right major, like, that's no longer a given. And that collapse of the future is the thing that actually causes us anxiety. The actual economic conditions are just going to change. They're not like good or bad, or, there's no like judgment, and humans can adapt to any condition. Like, this is why we're so great as a species, right? Is like, we're highly adaptive. It's okay. We're going to have jobs if we just adapt. The problem is that our whole understanding of what our future should be is going to no longer be true. And it is very hard to adapt to a complete like disembedding from a known future and be in this state of chaos where you really don't know what the future is going to be. And you just have to like figure it out. That's the thing that causes people anxiety.
And every person has to go through that, right? So every person's going to have to dig a little deeper in their soul and find out what reserve of agency they have left in a world where everyone's being dislocated at once. Okay, great frame to start the show with. Let me offer this to you. Best starting of a show we've had this year, so thank you. That's great, because it sets up everything that's about to happen. So a few years ago, just a couple years ago, right after the pandemic, you're at Pendo working with a colleague there named Chad Burnett. And
Yes,
you had
that's
an
right.
epiphany, right? So you two had an epiphany about what is coming. Tell me a little bit about that moment of dawning awareness about agents.
So yes, Chad and I were working together at Pendo in 2021 and 2022. And of course, one of the things that had happened in 2022 is ChatGPT came out, right? And at the time, he and I were working actually on another project that one of the founders of Pendo was starting as well. And we both started working with the OpenAI technology in different directions. So he was actually trying to use it in order to build an agent, like a pretty practical agent. And he was finding that it was very hard to know what the agent was doing and keep it on the rails, right? And I had been thinking about it more in terms of an evolutionary perspective, like thinking about it as a futurist. And so I do have a background in scenario planning. And so the way that I think about sensing the future is always through a scenario planning approach, right? Like, where are the trends taking us, and where are the different possibilities? Like, how are the conditions of possibility being set up for a future that may emerge? And there's never one future that's going to emerge, right? There's always several potentialities that may emerge. So if you understand the universe of potentialities, and then you start to weight your probabilities against those different potential futures, that's how you start to see where the trajectory is and how to skate to where the puck is going, as opposed to where it is. It's very easy to say that in a trite way, very hard to do it in reality without this sort of more structured, like, scenario planning style approach.
Right.
So in the scenarios that I was thinking about, it was very clear that AI agents were going to start. And again, this was 2023 at this point. And I had been talking to some of the leaders at Microsoft and OpenAI. And it was very clear that AI agents were going to be like fully formed kind of autonomous workers inside companies very soon. Like, even then they were talking about it. And as I was thinking about the potential scenario for the future, it's like these agents, they work at machine speeds. They work in, machine levels. They work at these, just exponentially larger, scales than human minds can control them. And so the the obvious need was going to be for AI to supervise AI because humans were not going to be able to do it, right? And so we were going to actually have to lean on the technology itself in order to create the controls for AI agents in the future. And so
Let me
from
let
that,
me let me interrupt you. I apologize. I don't mean to bust in, but I want to frame this for the folks who are listening because I want to just offer some insight. So this is around 2022. We just emerged from the pandemic, which of course is a giant dislocation and caused us to rethink a lot of our fundamental assumptions about what the workplace is or should be or could be. And in the meantime, OpenAI is grinding out these models one after another, GPT-1, GPT-2, but they were pretty bad. I mean, candidly, they were great advances, from a computer science standpoint, but from an end user standpoint, I remember we did an art piece with GPT-2 because it was more like comedy. It was like
right.
it couldn't even formulate a sentence
Right.
properly. It was like a Dadaist version of of a game. But then March 2023 is really the turning point because that's when they dropped ChatGPT. So it's not just GPT-3, but the chat interface
Yeah.
that suddenly, GPT-4, that made it possible for people to communicate with the AI in a way where
That was
actually,
November of 2022. Actually, was 3.5, right? When they
right.
had, they
That
had
on its
like
own was not so useful for most
right.
people, right?
That's right. Yeah.
The
Yep.
only
Yeah.
point I'm trying to make here with the little chronology is that it was very easy to be skeptical at that time. It was very easy to dismiss AI. And most people that I was dealing with at the time were like, come on, look at these servers. They don't really work. And I'm like, yeah, but they're improving. But they're like, you can't, they had a hard time visualizing it. And so I want the folks who are listening to understand the key insights that Tatyana had were exactly at this moment when most people were skeptical and dismissive. She was going the other direction. She was saying, okay, if this works and the trajectory that it's on continues, then in the future, the following things are going to be possible. And therefore, we're going to need supervision. And that's high order thinking because it's like second or third order consequences on very little data and frankly, not much to give you confidence on, unless you're talking to OpenAI, who, of course, they're the cheerleaders. They're going to tell you it's going to all be great. Trust us. But for most people, that wasn't their experience. I mean, 2022, it just seems like it was just a couple of years ago. But in those days, that was like the dark ages of these conversational bots.
Okay. But to be honest, I had a little help. So the reason why I always have this book nearby. So this is the other advantage of spending 7
She's
years
holding
in
a
grad.
copy of Marvin Minsky's The Emotion Machine. So this is the famous MIT researcher in computer science and machine learning. Go ahead.
So this book was published in 2006. The advantage of spending 7 years in graduate school is you have a lot of time to read very, very nerdy things. And so the very last paragraph, and you can edit this out if you want, but the very last paragraph of The Emotion Machine, I'm going to read it to you. In the coming decades, many researchers will try to develop more resourceful machines, but every system that we build will surprise us with new kinds of flaws until those machines become clever enough to conceal their faults from us. Sometimes we'll be able to diagnose specific errors in those designs, and then we'll be able to remedy those errors. But whenever we fail to find ways to make such repairs, we will have little choice except to add more checks and balances. For example, more critics and censors, meaning external critics and censors. However, we'll never find any one foolproof way to choose between the advantages of immediate actions and the benefits of cautious reflective thinking. So, whatever we do, we can be sure that the road toward post-human minds won't be smooth. So
Wow.
I saw it, and then I remembered this book, which I read decades ago. And I was like, wait, there's validation, right? So like you're looking not just like, you don't want to become a narcissist thinking like, oh, I'm the smartest person in the world. I see the patterns and other people don't. You're trying to find validation in other experts that have seen this or predicted the same thing that you are now seeing and predicting. So I did have
That's remarkably prescient. I was not familiar with that quote from Marvin Minsky, so thanks for sharing that with us. I think it stays in the show. I liked it. But also, like, that's great. So you were able to integrate something that was written in 2006. You saw it, you saw the configuration 2 decades later almost, and you saw the configuration emerging. You're like, oh, hang on a second. Let me dig deep in my mental database here. There actually is some information we can use. So that's the starting point. That's the epiphany. At that point, you're like, wow, there is going to be a need for an organization that can build the checks and balances, the external critics, if you will, to govern these systems. And that's the beginning of Wayfound.
Correct.
Tell me
That's
about
right.
that. So you set out with Chad to create a company to solve that problem, but this is also
No.
pretty recent. Oh no.
No. So first, I wrote some white papers in
Ah,
2023.
of course.
So again, my
How
intellectual
academic.
nerdy. I know, right? I'm such a nerd in
No,
so
it's
many
great.
ways.
I do this too. You have to write your ideas down to structure your thinking, of course.
Yeah. So first, I wrote some white papers on what do these external checks and balances look like. What will it take, especially since agents are going to work across the economy, right? Not just within
Mhm.
one company, but they're going to have to work across different companies, across economic organizations. Obviously, the internet was now a much bigger thing, is now a much bigger thing than it was in even 2006. So the interoperability is going to be an issue. So I wrote some white papers. And those white papers got some attention, and from OpenAI, Microsoft, talked to some of the top leaders in both
Oh.
those organizations. And I tried to convince them to build this. So my
Oh, great.
first
So you took it to them first saying, here's a problem that needs to be solved. Oh, that's so great. And they're like, sorry, we're busy. It's item number 152 on the list.
That is literally, Rob, you guessed it. That's exactly what happened.
By the way,
And
that's a great way to start a startup company, right? It is on their list. It's just they're never going to get to it. So if you build the company, they're going to need it, right? They're your first customers or partners.
or well, we'll see on that one. I'm not sure, but the point is that they were too busy with other things. At the same time, Kevin Scott, the CTO of Microsoft, gave me some amazing feedback about where
Oh,
to
great.
start.
Oh, right.
And so, like, if Kevin Scott's telling you feedback on like how you should actually execute this plan, I mean, you listen, right? 'Cause
Great.
he knows
Yeah,
what he's talking about.
I
And
agree. Yeah.
so then, Chad and I started talking about like, let's pivot from doing this agent to actually building the supervision piece.
Very
And in
cool.
March 2024, we incorporated the company in January of 2024, and we launched the first product in March of 2024, which was the agent, like a sales agent, but with this high order supervisor, this high order critic.
Again, that's
Um,
so early
I
compared to everyone
know.
else. You guys were
I
way ahead of the curve. Also, that's
that this is
fast. I mean, to start a company and launch a product in 2 months is amazing.
so this is what I do. I mean, I've done this already like many times in companies.
Okay,
I
great.
I move much faster in product development than most people, even inside big companies. And Chad was already well ahead, right, in kind of writing the code, so it wasn't that difficult. At the same time, you're right. And by the way, Rob, this is the problem of a lot of startups that found out is being right but early,
Yeah,
because investors don't like early, right?
yeah,
They want fast revenue, and fast revenue doesn't happen when you're creating a market, right?
yeah. That's
So
very true. Market creation is the hardest thing in the world to do, but also the core underlying technology, the models weren't really ready for prime time yet.
you're so right. In early on, we had to build a whole bunch of deterministic systems that like were
Oh my,
scaffolds to
yeah,
the LLMs, because the LLMs just weren't good enough. So we
yep.
had all these regex things, and we had all these like really dumb old school software just because the models weren't good enough. Now we're
So
able to transition almost entirely to the
yeah,
models
that
with
means you had to go back and rip out and replace all that early stuff. I mean, that's kind of the cost of being a market leader or inventing a new category. For the folks who are listening, though, I want to underscore something that Tatyana just said, because I think it's really important as a practice. What she said is that if you share your thoughts, you have a great idea, you have an epiphany, write it down in the form of a white paper and share it with people. You can get valuable feedback that's going to set you on the course. It's also going to build relationships that are going to be valuable in the future. Now, a lot of folks don't do that. A lot of people have a great idea, but they keep it secret, right? Because they don't want their good idea to get out. And the message here, I think, is ideas are cheap and abundant. Execution matters. And that's really what I'm hearing from you, is that in 2024, you said, okay, The models aren't ready yet. Doesn't matter. The opportunity is here, and we can hit it now. We're going to go execute immediately, even if we have to throw everything away. So that's the beginning of the company called Wayfound. And for the folks who are listening, if you search Wayfound, you'll find several different versions because the name is used in different categories by different companies. But we're talking about Wayfound with something special. It's Wayfound and Guardian Angels. Guardian Agents. Guardian Agents. I just messed up, but that's a natural. That's actually the joke, I guess. And that term came from Gartner Research, right? Yeah. So Gartner coined the term. But the idea here is what you should search for. That's really the payload is the Guardian Agent. Tell me what that is. Unpack that term for our audience.
Well, you can also go to Wayfound.AI, I will just say, right? Wayfound.AI. And that's us, Wayfound.AI. So a Guardian agent is essentially a supervisor agent. And the reason why Gartner really created this as a new category is because they wanted to emphasize that this is not just about a platform of different tools and technologies. It is actually using agents to supervise and govern other agents. So they also were kind of seeing that the only way to effectively manage and supervise and ensure the security of this new type of technology was to actually build agents to do it. So there's a lot of like ML ops and AI ops and, a lot of like LLM monitoring tools and things like that. And what Gartner is saying is that's not good enough, right? You're actually going to need a high order reasoning agent to actually really supervise and improve and keep this technology steered in a direction that you want it to go. So
it's like that old adage, it takes a thief to catch a thief. Like you have to, if you want to manage these things, I think some of the folks who haven't, who might be listening to the show, but might not have built an agent themselves, what they might not realize is there is a thing called agent fatigue that happens to every single person. You build an agent and then you realize you need a couple. And so you start to build several agents. And now you have the interesting new job of orchestrating those agents and thinking of new tasks for them to do and then checking their work. But there's a catch because the agents work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you have to eat and sleep as a human. So you're constantly playing catch up with your menagerie of agents. This is a very difficult problem. And every single person who has built a suite of agents has gone through this euphoria where, wow, the things are working. Hey, how cool. I go have dinner and they're still working and they're generating. That's cool. And then after a week or two, they start to realize, oh my gosh, I can't keep up this pace anymore. And that is agentic burnout. That happens to seemingly to every person who's dipped a toe in this ocean. And so what you're proposing as a solution is no, build an agent that supervises all that stuff. And that agent should be good enough to monitor 24/7 and smart enough to notify you, the human, if there's a need for human intervention. Did I get it right?
That's exactly right. With one caveat, don't build it. We've got the agent, right? We've got the framework, right?
Okay,
so, because a lot of companies are trying to build their own supervisor agents, which has a lot of different problems, which we can get into, but a lot of them are technical problems.
Okay.
But the other thing is, there's the supervisor agent, needs to be constructed to know that is its one and only job. If you try to mix
interesting
goals inside the supervisor agent. So for example, if you put it as part of a workflow or you try to have a part of a process of an agent checking its own work, you do not get very good outcomes.
Oh, so it's like an auditor. It's like somebody who comes in who's completely disinterested and doesn't have a stake in the outcome, and they just go through and just the facts, folks, and they check it out and they give you a report, which might not be the report you're looking for, but it's the facts. Okay,
it's like having a student grading their own work versus having a teacher grade the work.
Okay, great. On that note, let's take a little break here. Folks, you're listening to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tursik, and this week I'm talking to Tatyana Mamut from a company called Wayfound.AI. We'll be back right after this.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurist podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. For information about all our podcasts, go to Provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tursik, and this week I'm talking to Tatyana Mamut of a new company called Wayfound.AI. And as you may have heard, if you listen to the first half, what we're talking about is the use of agents, AI agents, who can execute tasks autonomously. And while this offers great promise for the future of work, it also introduces all sorts of complexity and new problems that we didn't anticipate. And that's exactly why Wayfound was started. So one of the interesting things about your company that I think people should know about is you eat your own dog food. You built the company using your own agents. Tell me a little bit about that process, because I think that's something everybody could learn from.
Yeah. And I love, Rob, that you said eat your own dog food instead of drink your own champagne, because it's supposed to taste like dog food, right? That's the whole reason why people want to improve it, right? Because it tastes awful. If it tastes fantastic, nobody wants to improve it. So yeah, just my little caveat as a product leader, I never say drink your own champagne. So we set out to build Wayfound, and it was very clear that we needed to like really feel the pain that our customers were going to be feeling. Okay.
Right.
So that's issue number one, right? Issue number one is make sure you feel your pain, the pain of your customers for realsies. Like, not that you talk to them and get them to describe their pain, actually do it, right? Because the proof is in the pudding. When you're in that seat and you're having, you're forcing, your whole company to ensure that your customers are always interacting with their agents, it feels totally different. So some of the ways we got started is obviously on our website, we had an LLM agent that we built to the OpenAI APIs, right? And customers were coming to our website. And it was, again, this was early 2024. So it was March of 2024, launched the company, had, people on the internet chatting with our agent. And this was our front door to our product, right? So I was like constantly like watching it and improving it. And, the supervisor, making sure that the supervisor was doing well. The other piece is our investors. All of our investors chat with an agent. So we tell them in our investor updates, we do like the high level investor updates. And then we say, and if you have questions about the financials, chat with our agent. We give them a link to the agent. So even the investors chat with our agent. And by the way, things go wrong, right? Because it's
Okay.
it's an
I was
LLM.
going to ask you that. Thanks. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
okay.
things go wrong. And again, so no part of the company was like going to not be eating this dog food, right? And it was dog food, and it's still dog food. We had the investor agent break yesterday because some of our token, because of the Vercel thing, we changed our tokens, and like our investor agent broke and we didn't know. Anyway, so it's still dog food, by the way. It's still dog food.
You build a business on top of AI, then they change the model, and it's like, oh, now it's all broken, and we have to go. That is just the nature of the thing. I mean, that just might be the nature of work in the future. Like, companies are going to be a work in progress. In a way, they always are.
They always are. They always are. You can never rest on your laurels, right? If you do, you turn into BlackBerry. But everybody loved it until they didn't. But So like the whole idea was, yes, we're going to just fully go on it all in. And, and we were totally AI pilled. Like from the beginning, we were completely like, there was never a question in our minds that this was headed towards superintelligence, ever. And we were, bitter lesson pilled. We were AI pilled from the beginning, like back in like late 2022, we were completely AI pilled. So it was like, we're all in on this technology and we're just going to ride the wave, and where it breaks, we're going to go down, right? We're going to like wipe out. We're going to do everything to just be at the cutting edge of this wave. And that's how we built the company, right? And so I said from the beginning, we're not going to have any product managers because we're going to have builders, right? And we're going to have AI agents writing all the specs, doing all the customer discovery. We're going to have, AI agents, doing a lot of like the, aligning the roadmap to the customer needs. We're going to have AI agents doing all of that, right? And we did have a designer initially because a lot of the design work couldn't be done by agents. Now it can, and now we don't have a full-time designer anymore, right? We have a freelance designer who uses a lot of the tools, and our engineers use a lot of the AI design tools now. No sales and marketing people, right? Never have a product marketer, because why, right? Claude's a better product marketer than most product marketers. So we completely rethought how we were doing everything from the beginning, because it's a lot more painful to reorg the company and, lay off people or try to get them to change than it is to just natively build a Gen AI company.
Let me see if I can recap what we just heard, because this is super interesting and it goes straight to the point that I wanted to get to today, which is that this is about restructuring the workforce and reconceiving what is a company. What's the point of a company? Why do we all go to work? Why do we go to an office? Do we need to go to an office? All these questions were raised during the pandemic. Well, now they're being answered. And in many cases, the answer is no, you don't have to. It's optional. And you can reconfigure your company or redesign it with AI at the core. And that means you can redesign it for efficiency and scale in ways that we previously couldn't even imagine. Example is the speed that they operate at, but also the idea that many of the functions inside of big corporations, and I'm thinking of legacy companies of, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of employees, many of the internal functions there are internal communications. So you mentioned product managers, right? So this is a person who gathers specifications and turns them into language that engineers can understand so that they know what to build. And then they track the progress, right? So then you have a program manager who's there tracking the progress and has the Gantt chart or linear or whatever. They're tracking things as they flow through that pipeline so that other people in the company understand what to do. But these functions are basically connective tissue and a kind of communication layer that helps the rest of the company understand where all the pieces are as they're trying to assemble a new product. And my premise is that all of those jobs are going to be automated sooner than we can imagine. All those internal communications jobs, all that stuff where you're checking status reports or building a Gantt chart or checking deliverables against a schedule or something like that, that's all going to change. There'll still be jobs for people who make stuff. There'll still be jobs for people who deliver and install stuff, and probably for people who sell stuff for those jobs that require human sales. But the job of tracking and defining and measuring all the progress of all those pieces as they go through the pipeline, that's clearly earmarked for automation. Now, that's a scary message, right? So if I said that to some people, they'd freak out because that's their entire career. And these are people who are highly qualified. They're not laggards. They're not unqualified. They're great at it. It's just that job can be done by an AI. And what you're saying is it's already here. You built your company doing it. So it's not theory. It's not something that's coming. It came. It's here. It's already built. It's available today at Wayfound.AI. Is that on track? I mean, that's kind of the direction you seem to be going.
That's exactly right. Now, I do want to make a clarification.
Sure.
And I think your analysis of this is absolutely right. So the coordination pieces and the communication pieces, that's work of AI agents. But product leadership and vision, that's still a human job, right?
Okay, so telling the machines what to do, that's a human thing. And also the discernment, is this thing good enough? No, sorry, send it back. That's a human job. Great.
Relationships, judgment, taste, intuition. Those are the things in the product field that are still require humans, right? So product management or project management, that part of the product manager's job, AI agents, right? We don't need it. But product vision, intuition, and that deep intuition.
Steve Jobs.
Feeling the pain of your customer for real better than they feel it themselves, right? That's the human job, right? Yeah, and then aligning your whole team and inspiring your whole team to go after that thing in the right way. That's the human job.
It's really quite extraordinary. I had that experience about 18 months ago. I had started a company and managed to recruit a superb head of product, And this is a person who had some 25 people working for him, but then it was matrixed organization. So there were, 25 or 50 other people around him, around that group that he dealt with every day. And we were doing some planning. I was trying to figure out the headcount for the following year. And I said, gee, how many people did you have? And he described that. I said, gosh, do we need to recreate that organization? And he said, no. He said, I'm pretty sure we can do it all with agents. I don't think we need to hire anybody else in this department. So we're talking about a 25-person organization that interfaced with 25 or 50 other people. And I'm hearing from the person himself, nope, I can probably do it myself. And he was actually talking about coding the agents himself. He felt like he had a very good understanding of what he needed. And he would just start systematically building one after another and probably, changing them as you go and replacing them as they get better and better. Now we seem to be getting to a point, though, where the agents can actually write themselves. I mean, certainly that's the takeaway from the recent announcements from Anthropic about mythos, where recursive software is starting to write better and better software. That scares a lot of people. Talk to me a little bit about that recursive coding applied to agents.
So there's two types of recursion, and I think that so let me just say, so the recursion, that is improvement, right? So here's my mental model of product management. I have this 360 degrees of my degrees of freedom framework. Okay. So when you're a product innovator, you're always thinking about how many degrees of freedom am I taking away with this decision that I'm making. Okay. So the great thing about being a product innovator is when you start, you have 360 degrees of freedom. You can literally do anything you want. The first decision you make, you cut those degrees of freedom in half. The second decision you make, you cut it in half again. And the third decision you cut in half again. So you've just gone from 360 degrees of freedom to less than 45, right? So here's the thing about recursion. So recursive improvement, whether it's supervised improvement with a supervisor agent like Wayfound, or self-improvement, letting agents improve themselves, which, by the way, we do not recommend to anybody. Do supervised improvement, because you can see where
you might not like what it comes up with.
Correct.
I totally
You've got a misaligned agent. That misalignment will just escalate if you let it improve itself, right? So don't do that. Don't do self-improvement, okay? But supervised improvement, which we are having customers do right now with our platform, you're limited, right? The recursion takes place in a very limited space of freedom, okay? The whole idea of humans, in order to move outside of that limited space of improvement or that limited space of development, you need a human intervention to take it from this area back to another area. Okay. We have not seen, because they work on feedback, right? Feedback from the world, feedback from their own, kind of operations, right? So they're trying to continuously improve, pretty much incrementally, but not completely do something else. So you're never going to have a sales agent that through recursive self-improvement becomes, the best, LinkedIn marketer in the world.
Right. Yeah. You need real world feedback. And without that, these systems are self-contained. They'll hallucinate their way to something, but it won't necessarily pertain to the real world. So in that respect, you're saying that humans are acting.
They might not even hallucinate. What I'm saying is they're going to recursively improve within a limited defined space that the humans have given them, usually, right? And when they go off the rails, you hopefully have systems that show you that. And so that, don't do the scary part about it is self-improvements, right? So you have a sales agent that's self-improving, and then it starts hallucinating or lying to customers.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. So in this context, what you're saying is the human being is acting as kind of the real world sensory apparatus that's giving real world feedback to the agent. The agent's still this brain in a jar. It has no sensory apparatus.
That's actually not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, because it can actually have access to real world feedback. As soon as a sales agent interacts with a human, it has real world feedback without an employee in the mix, right? Or if it tries to interact with a Salesforce system, right? And the APIs have changed, it will find that and say, oh, the APIs have changed, I should go do something else, and it'll do it on its own. So I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it won't become something else.
Okay.
It won't fundamentally shift its core identity, its core role and goal on its own. And so if you have supervised improvement, it's improving within a narrow space of what it should be doing in terms of its role and goal. Okay. Where there's another type of recursion is the totally free, we're going to give, this LLM a total, more 360 degrees of freedom and allow it to do anything it wants. I don't know why anyone would do that right now, because it seems like it would just spend billions of tokens doing something completely random. It would be Google's, 20% time, only wouldn't be 20%. It would be you remember Google's 20% time, a few other employees did completely random things.
Yep.
Right.
You would burn through your token budget and get something that might be interesting, but it might not be relevant, and it might not even work. Okay, so what I'm hearing, interestingly, this is like the flip side of what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, because we were talking about scenario planning, and one of the points you made then was that scenario planning, as you plot out trend lines into the future, more and more possibilities emerge, and so the cone of possibility is constantly expanding the further you go into the future. That's scenario planning. But now what you're talking about in the context of recursion and supervised training is that we're actually kind of shrinking the cone of possibility. And we can kind of, I think what we would try to do is shrink the cone of possibility where we see like, okay, here's the normal trajectory. If we do nothing else, that's the default we're likely to get to. It's the most probable outcome. But we have a preferred outcome in mind. And so we're going to try to steer it towards a preferred outcome. And
Right.
so this is for folks who are interested in future planning and scenario planning. This is a superb, almost case study of how to apply scenario planning and the cone of possibility to agents, and then how to constrain it so that you get the desired outcome. I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by this conversation, but I think given the time, I want to just shift to one other topic, which is let me set it up a little bit here. So, in February, at the beginning of February, a research firm called Citrini released a blog post that was called the 2026 Software Crisis.
Yes.
And then the next day, the leading SaaS companies, the leading enterprise software vendors, saw massive sell-offs. In fact, by the time the damage was done, billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars had been erased from the market caps of those companies. And some companies like Adobe, they're perfectly good companies that have profit and they're making AI tools and so forth. But those companies got clobbered, lost some 30% of their market cap in a matter of days. Now, bear in mind, this isn't new research. There wasn't really any factual data. This was pure speculation. It was a blog post written by a research outfit that wasn't even grounded necessarily in an analysis. It was more like speculation. And it triggered this gigantic sell-off. And what the people are calling that now is the SaaS apocalypse. So that's they're foretelling a future scenario where the terminal value of any software company that's publicly traded is zero. And that's scary to a lot of people, right? For anyone who's buying those products, you wonder, is my vendor stable? For the people who work in those companies, is my career safe? For the people who are running them, they're being asked questions they can't really answer. They're not equipped to answer right now. Now, my understanding is that Wayfound was founded with a completely different premise. Your view is that SaaS, that model, is ancient history at this point, and it's time to push the whole thing off the cliff. That might not be your words. That's my interpretation. Why don't you clarify for me what Wayfound's position vis-a-vis the SaaS apocalypse is?
My position is that companies, just like people, are going to have to adapt or die. So the only question is, how quickly do all these companies adapt? The companies that are going to lose are the ones who are doing the BlackBerry move. And the BlackBerry move is, no, no, no. Our customers are deeply embedded with us. We sell to enterprises. And so nobody would ever use this insecure other system called an iPhone. That's ridiculous. We have research. Our customers love the tactile keyboard. We sell to enterprises. We have security. Nobody's going to buy the iPhone. The companies that are going to die have that attitude. The companies that are going to do really well are the ones that go all in on AI agents, burn the boats, do not make any excuses, and adapt as fast as possible to the new world.
Wow, that's quite a statement. And there's kind of a corollary to that, which is the customers of those big enterprise software vendors. Those companies also have a challenge that they have to confront, which is the question of whether they can retool their entire operation and move AI to the center, reconfigure that giant old company with AI at the center. And if they can make that transition faster than a startup company that's built from the ground up can achieve scale. So it's a question of big companies retooling versus new companies scaling. And that is the race that we're seeing right now. This is one of the most exciting chapters of the technology space that I've ever seen. I find it fascinating. And in a way, Wayfound is at the forefront of this. You are one of those startup companies. You're using the AI tools. You're building it from the ground up, but you're also selling that to solutions. So in some respects, Wayfound might look like what the future of a SaaS company might be in success.
I think we really are. And we work with all of us have worked in very large companies in the past. We know what works. We know what doesn't. We took the best of what works from those companies and we, AGI pilled it. And we're the new type of organization is what I really believe.
Now, what you're saying, though, when I'm hearing you say again and again is it's early. These systems are unstable, sometimes by design, but sometimes because they're not deterministic, they're probabilistic. So we don't always know we're going to get the right result. Sometimes the model changes and what you build has to get revised accordingly. And so I think what that does for a lot of people is it causes them to feel insecure and they're not quite sure how much they can rely on this. And so at the core, that's a trust question. And candidly, these days, there's a lot of distrust of technology companies. I think rightly so. I think people are right to be skeptical and hold those companies to high standards given their value and their influence on our society. So there are some trust questions that arise. And really the core premise, I think, of Wayfound is about trust as an organizational principle. Maybe you can help me understand that a little bit better.
It absolutely is. In fact, our very first investor deck, that was exactly what it is. How
really?
will companies, yes, that's exactly what we said.
I
How
didn't
will
know that. That's
companies-
interesting.
How will companies trust AI agents? And the only way is to have a great AI agent on your side that is your frontline supervisor, right?
Wow.
The only way that you trust, I mean, how does Gap trust its, workforce, right, in all of its stores when the executives aren't in all the stores all over the world, right? They have these frontline supervisors that they train and that they trust. And then they keep the employees and the actual
that's a
business
good analogy.
operations functioning.
It's a good analogy. So effectively, you're building the management corps for a corporation, like you're the management force to manage all these AI agents. Now, that introduces a related topic, which I'm really curious about, which is about compliance. We have HR departments to manage those managers and to train them so that when they do manage their workforce, your example is the Gap and all the regional managers and all the retail shops across the country. The supervisors and management can't be in every store every single day, so they have to delegate. And as soon as you delegate, you introduce an element of risk because the people you delegate to might do something wrong, and that sets up a liability risk for the company, or there might be a compliance problem. And so this is really a big function of HR. It's a big priority for the finance department, too, to protect the corporation. Are you saying that in some respects, Wayfound's solution is an automated version of that kind of compliance or governance, I should say? Is that really where the direction you're heading?
That is already how our customers are using it as a governance across. There are several companies that are now kind of wall-to-wall Wayfound, where all the functions across the entire organization have to put their agents on Wayfound to be supervised for compliance, because there are the legal team, the compliance team needs to know that there's, governance in place and that the same consistent set of policies are being enforced the same way. So like if you've got an AI agent built on OpenAI and another one built on Agentforce, right? And you just have the guardrails inside those two platforms, you don't know that they're being implemented in exactly the same way or interpreted the same way.
It's a huge issue. I want to underscore it. And also, you don't know what values were encoded in those platforms. Candidly, they're not your platforms, right? It's a product. And so for a big corporation, that's a gigantic risk that you're taking. It's a compliance risk that you're introducing into the company. So from a risk management standpoint, you're saying you want to catch a thief, you better hire a thief. Let me say it better than that. If you want to manage an agent from some external vendor, you better have your own supervisor agent who's looking out for your best interest, whose values are aligned with the company's values, and who is accountable. Now, when that brings up the question of accountable, because when we deal with vendors, we always like to have one neck to choke. Is that Wayfound's job? Are you the people who are accountable for that?
Well, so that's like asking, we're the ones that provide you with the tool to be accountable, right? And to be compliant. We use Vanta, right? They're not accountable if, we have a cybersecurity incident.
Right. Okay. So you're providing the cars, but you're not the taxi cab company. That's the taxi cab company is the operator.
Well, not exactly, because we're selling the car. Like we're more like Ford, right? Or like, Tesla, right? We're selling the car,
That's what I mean.
But you're driving it, right?
Got it.
Like
Understood.
the company itself ultimately at the end of the day, our supervisor enforces the company's policies. Right. We don't enforce our own policies, right?
So what you're underscoring is the need for corporations now to come up with an AI mandate and policies, internal policies for governance. That's on them to do that. Do you help them with that? Do you help them understand how to build that?
We do. We spend a lot of time in the onboarding process helping them. We have hierarchical guidelines. So we have regulatory and legal guidelines that sit at the highest level. Then we have what we call global guidelines, which apply to all the agents within an organization. And then we have agent-specific guidelines. So we have that hierarchy, and then we work with the different stakeholders in the company to ensure that that hierarchy is correct and that it's enforced in a way that, again, the company wants enforced.
Okay, so now in the last few minutes that we have left, I want to understand your vision of what a company in the future will look like with an agentic workforce working alongside a human workforce. And to start with that, let me ask you one quick question, because when I first became aware of your company, I think I heard that there were 7 employees and 22 agents, but I think that's changed now, right? So the ratio of human workers to agents, what is that at Wayfound?
4 full-time humans, 4 contractors and freelancers, and 27 AI agents.
Oh, cool. Okay, so now is that the template for the company of the future?
I think it's emerging, but I do think that like with a template for the company in the future is to understand where is the human value, and again, think about judgment, taste, relationships, and intuition, right? Where do we need that? And so we need that in creating the product, right? So we're going to have a product builder that really understands what the market needs and directs all the AI agents to execute on what the market needs. Then we're going to have sales and we need to sell the product, right? So we're going to have a person who has amazing relationships across all the buyers, and then they're going to have their fleet of agents that are executing on, the marketing materials and creating custom demos and things like that, right? So like that, and then we have staying compliant, right? And operating a company so that you don't get sued by the IRS or something, right? So you're going to have the operational side, right? The people who really know what that takes, and they're going to have their team of agents. So that's how I think we're going to configure companies. Like, what are the big problems that need to be solved within an organization? What are the human talents and skills that's required to set up this team of automated, executors, right? To actually then do that work.
Fascinating. So what's the implication for a bigger corporation? Like, what do those look like in 10 years?
Well, I think that it is going to be, I think a lot of them are going to have to go through a very, very painful transition point. And it does not mean laying off people in currently known functions. It means actually doing a fully redesigned, redesigning the organization and really starting with those, from first principles. What are the problems that our organization needs to solve? Like, how do we access our customers? What kinds of talents do we need for that? And then let's design that piece, so really an organizational redesign exercise as opposed to just laying off people within already known functions. That is not going to go very far.
It's akin to the old adage of, changing the airplane wings while it's in flight. What we're talking about here is unbuilding company, because a company, most big companies are an accumulation of reactive decisions that were made in the past, and they just they accumulate this stuff. It's just this cruft that builds up and up and up, and you have administrative layers and compliance layers that are the result of decisions that were made decades ago, and they kind of move on. In a way, we kind of grow our companies unconsciously in this way, and what you're describing is a conscious decision to make choices among known alternatives about what the company of the future would look like. Well, gosh, Tatyana, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show. This has been a lively and fun conversation. You've answered a lot of questions that I had. Thank you for your candor. Thanks for sharing everything, even the hard lessons that you've learned and the tough spots that you went through. I think it's very instructive, inspiring for our audience. How can people learn more about you and Wayfound?
Follow me on LinkedIn. I post a lot. I have a lot of content there. The latest and greatest is always on my LinkedIn page. And then, of course, to find us and get a demo of Wayfound, you can go to Wayfound.AI. I do want to add one last thing before we go, which is I do think one of the things that I just want to reflect is fear is not a strategy. Fear is not a strategy. And when people tell me they're afraid, I'm like, you are basically setting yourself up for failure. Wow. And one of the things that we do at Wayfound is we go into organizations that are redesigning themselves, and we do a workshop. And that workshop is anywhere from a few hours to a few days. And we help the teams really reimagine what their jobs are going to be like with AI agents. And a lot of people come into that workshop afraid and anxious and like, I'm not technical, I don't know what to do. And they all come out, 100% of them, motivated, energized, and like, oh my God, I'm going to not have to do all this shit work. And the AI agents are going to do the shit work. And I'm actually going to do the things that I thought that I would have loved to do and I haven't had no time to do for the last 3 years.
That's the Sergey Brin promise. I can't wait. I want to live in that world. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's been pure pleasure, great fun, and great information for our listeners. And for folks who are listening, you've been listening to The Futurists with me, Rob Tercek, and my guest, Tatyana Mamut of Wayfound.AI. Every week on The Futurists, we'll bring you another person who's thinking about shaping and influencing the future so that they can build the future they envision. Don't miss us. We'll be back, and we'll see you in the future. Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.